Good morning and welcome to this Community Opportunities Flexible Procurement System webinar on behalf of Rotherham Metropolitan Borough Council. Thank you for joining me this morning. We are looking at sections 1 to 6 of the application form, and on Monday we're looking at section 7 of the application form. We have got a few people booked on this morning, so I will just do some quick housekeeping and introductions whilst people join us. For those that don't know me, my name is Gillian Askew. I'm a co-founder and director of Go for Growth. We are a micro-social enterprise, and we are partnering with Rotherham Council to help support the marketplace through this procurement, but also through any public sector opportunities where local voluntary sector or business community organisations would like some support. All the support that we offer is offered on a fully funded basis, so there is no cost to providers to take up the support from Go for Growth. We are on Zoom today. The session is being recorded. It will be on our YouTube platform, but I believe it will also come out in the clarification question functionality of the FPS as well. A copy of the recording and the slide deck will be sent out to all registered attendees as well. So please do feel free to make notes if you want to, but everything you see in here will come out to you after the session. We are on Zoom, so we have both the chat functionality and the Q&A functionality enabled today. So if you do have a question, please feel free to paste it either into the chat or into the Q&A function. I'll keep an eye on both as we go. I have carved out some time for questions at the end as well, but feel free to ask them as we go through. As I said, we'll be covering sections 1 to 6 this morning of the Flexible Purchasing System, the FPS for community opportunities. So just to say, the document that I'm using to go through, you'll see in the document structure in your tender as ITA Part 3, and it's a return document, RET-doc, it's actually called on the system. And also, just to let you know, I'm sure you've already seen that there are 3 lots in this particular FPS. Lot 1 is for community enablement services, Lot 2 is community personalised services, and Lot 3 is for community intensive support services, complex needs. So those are just a little bit of detail for where I'm and the document that I'm using to create the webinar support this morning. So we'll start with part 1, and it says in the documentation in part 1, it's all about your information and the bidding model. What it's asking us to do as bidders is to answer all questions in parts 1, 2 and 3. Applicants must ensure that every organisation on which they will rely to meet the selection criteria completes and submits their own answers and declaration for parts 1 and 2. So some early instructions in terms of which questions we need to answer, but also if we've got organisations that will rely on to meet any of the selection criteria, that they too complete and submit their answers and declaration for parts 1 and 2 as well. So in section 1, at the front end of any procurement, actually, there'll be something called the standard selection questionnaire. We actually have 2 types of selection at play. So for procurements that were entered into the market before the 24th of February 2025, and that is the Flexible Purchasing System, the FPS for Rotherham. This particular opportunity was put out into the market pre-24th of February. So it is governed by the regulations called the Public Contract Regulations of 2015. And that means that the standard selection questionnaire is being utilised. If you are interacting with procurements that are into the market on or after the 24th of February, it will be something called the procurement specific questionnaire. And there are just a couple of differences between the 2. But for the purposes of today, what's relevant to this particular procurement is the standard selection questionnaire. And as you know, we're looking at sections 1 to 6 today. In any procurement, there'll be bidder instructions. There are a number of documents for the FPS. Our advice is try not to be overwhelmed by these, but please don't ignore them either. Have a read through all of those documents. They will help you to navigate the process. You can ask questions throughout a process using the clarification functionality, the questioning, the messaging function in your tender. You can also reach out to Go for Growth as well and ask us any questions if you have them. And if we do get questions, we've got a couple of drop-in sessions in April and May. So if you have got any specific process-related questions, feel free to throw them over to Go for Growth in either those drop-in sessions, or my contact details are on the slide, so you can get in touch with us and we will push them through the clarification process as well. So section 1 is capturing details about your business, about you. So you'll be asked about your company name, your registered address, your registered website. You'll be asked about your trading status. So are you a limited company, a third sector organisation, a public limited company, etc., etc. You'll also be asked for your date of registration if you are a registered company, and you'll be asked for your company registration if you're registered at Companies House, or your charity registration if you are a registered charity. If you're registered for value-added tax for VAT, you'll also be asked for your VAT number, and you'll be asked for details of any authorisations, licences or trade registered or trade bodies that you might be a part of. And then there is a section called classification. So it's asking you whether you are a voluntary community and social enterprise type organisation or a mutual. There's a list of organisations there. You should be able to quite easily find definitions of those organisations, so should you need them. You'll also be asked if you are a small and medium-sized enterprise, a SME. And again, the definition of a SME should be clear and transparent to you. Typically, a small and medium-sized enterprise organisation would be up to 249 employees. But make sure that you read the definition of SME that's being utilised for this particular procurement. And if you are a small and medium enterprise, you can tick that. You'll also be asked about your PSC, persons of significant control, and they affect both businesses and charities. So if you're a limited company, you can check your persons of significant control on Companies House. So there is a tab for people, and then underneath there, or a further tab, you'll be able to see persons of significant control, and you can take the information directly out of Companies House. If you're a charity, this should also be true, as you're obliged to file a confirmation statement annually, and that will be when you would also be updating the persons of significant control register. So if you're a registered company or a registered charity, you should be able to get your persons of significant control details out of Companies House. And you may be part of a group organisation, so you may have a parent company, and if you have a parent company, you would also enter the details at this particular stage. Section 1 also looks at the bidding model. So it will ask you how you are bidding. And you might be bidding on your own on behalf of your sole organisation, but you might also be bidding as a part of a group of economic operators. And what that means is it's a group of economic operators or a collaboration. So if you were working with one or more other organisations, actually 2 or 3 organisations, whatever the number is, as a group coming together, and you haven't formed a new legal entity that combines all of that group of businesses, that would be a consortium or a special purpose vehicle, for example, then you will be bidding as a group of economic operators. And usually you'll be using something called the lead body model, where there will be one legal entity in which the contract is entered. So out of that group of economic operators, there will be one lead organisation that will therefore be the legal entity, unless, of course, you've formed a new organisation as part of the consortium. It's asking you about if you are using subcontractors, provide the following details. And it's also saying that it's not necessarily that you just rely on them to meet the criteria. So for example, in Go for Growth, we often work with another organisation called Perigene, especially when we're delivering training, but we often work with a different organisation. We're not reliant on them to meet the selection criteria or for delivery, but they might deliver some or part of a contract for us. So I would be including those organisations' details here. There is a footnote in the tender documents that says, irrespective of whether you rely on those organisations, you must include their details It is asking about core delivery and contractors. However, so some of your other contractors that you would use for things like waste are not included, unless, of course, that was the core delivery of the contract. So think about who you would be working with to deliver the core elements of the service delivery in this particular contract. And if you would be working with another organisation, you would be thinking about what basis you would be working with them on. Are they a group of economic operators, so effectively you're all equal, or would you be using someone as a subcontractor? And you'll enter the details into that part. In part 2, we start looking at exclusions. So there are 2 types of exclusion in public procurement. So there are grounds for mandatory exclusion and then grounds for discretionary exclusion. And you can see I've pasted from the actual ITA document. So please answer the following questions in full. And it's about every organisation that forms part of your bidding group or consortium, as well as every organisation that's being relied upon, including subcontractors that you are relying on, to meet the selection criteria, must complete and submit responses to part 1 and the declarations in part 2. So it's reminding us of what it told us already at part 1. And so in terms of mandatory exclusions, what it's looking at is within the past 5 years, anywhere in the world, and all of this is written down in the ITA document, have you or any person that is a member of the supplier's administrative, management or supervisory body or has powers of representation, decision or controlling the supplier. You're being asked about whether in the past 5 years, you or any of those persons anywhere in the world has got any issues relating to what you can see on screen. What you can see on screen is grounds for mandatory exclusion, and they constitute substantial issues. So what that means in terms of conviction, if any of those persons that I talked about have been convicted, you would likely be excluded from the competition and then unable to proceed. There are very few exceptions to this. And I've made a note of what the government says about it. So it says, in limited circumstances, in-scope organisations may disregard the existence of a ground for mandatory exclusion. This is confined to, on an exceptional basis, to where there are overriding reasons relating to the public interest, such as public health or protection of the environment, Regulation 57. So there are a few exclusions, but they are very few and far between. And it's likely if there has been a conviction for a grounds for mandatory exclusion that it would do what it says on the tin and that your bid would be excluded at that point. There are also mandatory and discretionary exclusions relating to the payment of taxes and social security. In the cases of discretionary exclusions, the regulations allow for but don't mandate that bidders should be excluded under certain grounds. And unlike mandatories, they don't cover specific criminal offences. So the decision to exclude on a discretionary basis would be done on a case-by-case basis by the contracting authority. But in terms of payment of taxes and social security, what it's asking is that you've met all your obligations relating to the payment of taxes in the country where you are established, and if that's different from the UK, also in the UK. And if the answer is no, there are further details to complete and a question on any payment arrangements that are in progress and completed, and that would include any accrued interest and any potential fines that had been levied as well. In terms of Section 4, remaining on discretionary exclusion grounds, you can see on screen the types of grounds that will come up for discretionary exclusion. So things like environmental breaches or breaches of social obligations or labour law obligations. It will ask about bankruptcy and insolvency of your company or potentially grave professional misconduct. Distortion of competition, conflicts of interest, and that includes where you might have been involved in the preparation of the procurement. It might also look at prior performance issues, misrepresentation, and the final one is undue advantage. So through influencing the decision-making process or providing misleading information which may have a material impact on exclusion, selection or reward. And you'll be asked to declare on both mandatory and discretionary exclusions on a yes-no basis of whether any of these relate to your business. If the answer is yes, you'll be asked for further information. On discretionary exclusions, the question is asking, whether for mandatories you notice for 5 years, for discretionary exclusions, it's whether within the past 3 years, anywhere in the world, have any of the situations summarised on the screen and they're listed in full at Annex D also applied to your business. So you can have a look at those. They are on a self-cleaning basis. If you have any of those are relevant to your business, you must answer yes, and then you would enter more information around it. On section 4 also, it talks about modern slavery, and you might decide actually to ask a clarification question on this, but effectively a relevant commercial organisation pursuant to section 54 of the Modern Slavery Act 2015 states if you carry on your business or part of your business in the UK supplying goods and services and have an annual turnover of at least 36 million. But question 4.3 is asking that even if you are not a relevant commercial organisation, to explain what measures have been taken to demonstrate your reliability despite the existence of a relevant ground for exclusion. For example, you don't turn over 36 million. As I say, you might decide to ask a clarification question on this, but in recent bids that we've done, we've talked about how we use things like ethical procurement, sustainable business practices, and policies, including procurement policies, to ensure that we can demonstrate our commitment to eradicating modern slavery in our supply chains. And we're a micro-social enterprise, so that statement and what we do physically is proportionate to what we buy, and it's proportionate and relevant to what we do. So our understanding is that's the kind of thing that question 4.3 is looking for. But we would always say, if you have any doubt in what a question means, then always ask a clarification to get the information directly from the contracting authority. So in part 3, we're looking at selection questions. In all cases, there will be some sort of economic and financial standing testing that's done. Contracting authorities effectively want to be sure that who they award to is financially stable enough to deliver the contract throughout the whole term. So what you're asked for example, is in 5.1 and 5.2, you'll be asked for a link to, a statement of your annual, an electronic link to Companies House, for example. So documentary evidence of an economic and financial standing electronically. So we're a limited company as well as being a registered social enterprise. So we would put a link to our annual accounts that are listed on Companies House. If that's not available, you'll be asked to supply detailed accounts for the last 2 years. If neither of those things are unavailable, there is a list of list of alternatives that you can utilise. So 5.3a talks about a statement of your annual turnover, profit and loss account, income statement, balance sheet statement, or financial position and statement of cash flow for the most recent years of trading, and a bank letter outlining the current cash and credit facility position. And 5.3b talks about alternative information to evidence economic and financial standing. For example, forecast financial statements and a statement of funding provided by either the owners of the business and or the bank, charity accruals accounts, or alternative means of demonstrating financial status. And that's really to make sure that any business, regardless of how new you might be into the market, has a fair opportunity to be able to demonstrate that economic and financial standing. So it goes through in order what you are required to submit. And if you don't have those things, there are alternatives for you to look at. If you are reliant on another member of a bidding group or any subcontractors to meet that economic and financial standing, it will ask you to confirm that the relevant person or entity is willing to provide a guarantee or other security if required. So effectively, 5.5 is checking about whether you're meeting that economic and financial criteria with reliance on another member of your group of economic operators, if that's how you're bidding, or any of your subcontractors for that criteria? And if so, they're asking you to provide an answer around whether they will guarantee in some way, shape, or form, or provide any other financial security that might be required. Section 6 is looking at technical and professional ability, and it's basically trying to look at and understand experience and capability in more detail. And this will be normally where you're asked for references, examples of contracts, etc. And it's all about demonstrating your capability. So you can see on screen that it's looking at relevant experiences and contract examples. Actually, if you are a new startup and you have not got contracts yet, or you haven't been working on a contract basis, you might have been working on a purchase order basis, then actually you may not have up to 3 contracts available. And in that case, there is a 500 words section for you to complete if you don't have those contract examples. Please remember, and I've highlighted it in yellow, that it is up to 3. So it isn't a minimum of 3, it's up to 3. So if you have one that will meet the criteria, then you can enter that one. Also, it's asking that for consortium bids, or where you have indicated earlier on that you are relying on a subcontractor in order to meet the technical and professional ability, you should provide relevant examples of where the consortium parties or members or subcontractors have delivered similar requirements as well. So where you are being used for core delivery, you'll be asked to provide examples of where consortium and partner members, subcontractors, have delivered similar requirements as well. So what it talks about, specific wording in this particular ITA, it says, please provide details of up to 3 contracts to meet the technical and professional ability criteria set out in the procurement documents in any combination from either public or private sectors, voluntary, charity, or social enterprise that are relevant to the requirement. So you could have been doing similar work that is relevant to this particular opportunity for private sector operators, for voluntary sector operators, not necessarily public sector operators. And what the ITA is saying is they all count as long as they're relevant to the requirement. It also goes on to say that VCSEs, voluntary community and social enterprises, may include samples from grant-funded work as well. And where this procurement is for supplies or services, the examples must be from the past 3 years. And because this is for services, that's applicable here. It also says where the requirement is for works, examples may be from the past 5 years, but this is for services, so it would be for the past 3 years. It goes on to say for consortium bids, or where you've indicated that you're relying on a subcontractor in order to meet the technical and professional ability, you should provide relevant examples, so what we've just talked about. If this is not possible, however, e.g. the consortium is newly formed, or it's a special purpose vehicle is to be created for this contract, then 3 separate examples should be provided between the principal members of the proposed consortium or members of the special purpose vehicle or subcontractors. 3 examples are not required for each member. So 3 separate examples on a combined basis. So some information there on how to navigate that technical and professional ability section in this ITA Part 3 return document.